In this video I'm going to be looking at removing and reinstalling the pedals on your bike. Now this applies to pedals on pretty much every bike. The pedals on this bike are clipless road pedals, but that doesn't really matter as far as removing and reinstalling them goes. You'll need either a spanner, wrench, or a hex key. If the pedal axle has flats on its arm to the outside of the cranks, then you can use a spanner there. If it doesn't have the flats, then you need to use a hex key on the inside, and pretty much all pedals have that as an option. In this case, I'm going to be using my spanner, and it's usually an 18mm spanner. Now, pedal threads are handed, or they're reversed on either side, which means that as you pedal, the motion is to tighten them rather than loosen them, so as to prevent them from coming undone. It's anti-clockwise to loosen on the right-hand side of the bike, which is the sort of normal way you would turn a bolt, but it's the other way around. It's clockwise on the left-hand side of the bike. What that means is that you would be pulling upwards if the spanner is towards the front of the bike, or you would be pushing downwards if the spanner is toward the back of the bike, and that applies on both sides. So you pull up at the front, and if they're really stuck, then you can stand on a spanner, for example, in which case you put it towards the spanner pointing towards the back. So in this case, I just insert the spanner on the right-hand side pedal and give it a good push towards the back of the bike. That's enough to loosen it, and then we can just use fingers to undo it the rest of the way. Now, as you undo it, you may notice that the old oil or anti-seize that may have been on there is turned black. That's not because that's the natural color of it, that's because it's accumulated dirt and road grime and stuff over time. So that's one good reason to pull the pedals off every now and then, just to give everything a bit of a clean and apply a new anti-seize, put it back on so everything's nice and clean. Now, once you've got your pedals off, assuming you're just pulling them off to clean them and put them back on, you want to get a rag and just wipe down the threads. Make sure you try to get into the actual threads themselves. Wipe around, remove all the old grime. You can use degreaser, you could use it on the rag, but be very careful because you don't want to get it anywhere near the rubber seals that are on the pedal axle closer to the pedal body, because they'll damage that. And do the same with the ends of the crank arms, the threads in the crank arms, give them a good clean. You can sort of bunch a rag up into a long thin shape and then thread it through, and turning it as if it were a bolt. That will get into the threads a little bit and give them a clean. Then I'm going to apply anti-seize. This is nickel-based anti-seize, which is not quite necessary. Usually you would use a copper-based anti-seize for this sort of thing. This is a steel pedal axle, sometimes they're titanium. Either way, that's very hard, and it's going into an aluminium crank usually. And aluminium is very soft, and it is vulnerable to being damaged by the hard aluminium. The anti-seize will stop what's called galling by the threads as you put them in, which means basically that the aluminium thread is better protected in the tightening and later loosening process. And it's also going to help prevent corrosion between the steel and the aluminium. So do both, and then finger tighten them. At this point you need to make sure that you have the correct pedal, left or right, that you're putting in place. With a specialist road pedal, it's quite obvious because they point the right direction. Otherwise it'll be marked L or R for left or right on the pedal body somewhere. And then to tighten them, using a spanner of the length that you can see pictured here, you just sort of push down with a bit of strength, but not too much. You certainly don't need a long wrench and a lot of torque. Remember, you are screwing a steel thread into an aluminium crank, and you will strip the threads on the alloy if you are not careful, so do not try to over tighten them. The action of pedaling serves to tighten them further if necessary. They're not going to come undone on their own, so yeah, go easy. And that is pretty much it done. You could just wipe up any excess anti-seize that may have squeezed out if you use too much. Otherwise, it's all good. Good luck out there. Have fun. Hope this was helpful.